Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am excited to bring to you Jacquiline Wagner, and let me tell you about Jacquiline. Jacquiline is a Esquire. Oh, got to note that she is attorney, is a proud founder and president of her human resources consulting enterprise, Wagner HR. Jacquiline uniquely understands the training and human resource needs of business owners, employers, and supervisors. For 25 years, Jacquiline has enjoyed the honor of training and consulting with thousands of workers in an assortment of industries concerning all aspects of employment law, human resources, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, business acumen, emotional intelligence, professional development, continuing education, and leadership. So all of it's there, you guys. She can help with everything. Based on her robust experience, Jacquiline believes that an engaged and inspired workforce is key to business success, and her human resources and employment law services are aimed at maximizing the human potential of the employees so employers receive their best work product. We're going to talk about a subject that I think you'll find very interesting. You know, I often talk about emotional intelligence. So we're going to talk about the relationships between EI and employment litigation risk. So please join me in welcoming my guest, Jacquiline Wagner. Jacquiline, I just think this is going to be so interesting because I could see where there is employment litigation risk and the EI. I coach leading with the heart, the head, and the hands. And emotional intelligence is a real key part, empathy and all those things. But the employment litigation risk is a twist. So before we get into this deep conversation on this interesting subject, we're going to ask two simple questions. The first is share with everyone, where do you live? Where do you call home?
Thank you for having me first. I'm in Los Angeles, California.
I was just in Anaheim celebrating 100 years of Toastmasters last week.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so loved going back to Los Angeles. Lots of good friends there. So share a bit of your story. You know, we just really gave kind of where you are today and all of these wonderful things that you've done and you do, but there has to have been something, some pivotal moments in the path in your journey that said, no, this is what I have to do. This is my mission, my passion.
So I've been litigating employment law for 25 years. And and I've always represented the employer. And the thing about defending the employer or representing the employer is you get to kind of pop the hood and look under and kind of see how the organization is being run. And in that process of getting to pop the hood, every piece of litigation I handle, I started to notice a trend pretty quickly in my career. And then, as I progressed in my career, I saw that it was true just about every single time. And that is the person who was the leader, who was the supervisor, who was the manager of the person suing, lacked emotional intelligence, lacked the ability to guide the employee to maximize their own potential. And in that process, when they took an adverse employment action against the employee, they were, demoted, fired, given a less interesting position. The employee, because they had been poorly led, was left with no choice but to believe, because they had no background information of why this was happening to them, or it was presented to them in such a way that was not really digestible by them. They were really left with no choice but to believe that the reason this was happening to them is because of, they were being harassed, discriminated against, or retaliated against. Not because they were lacking in their performance, but because they were left sort of in this vacuum of information, and they didn't have access to, their performance deficits. And so they were really left with no choice but to believe that this was the case. And perception is reality. And so when they're poorly led, when they don't have information and they're left with no choice, they're going to take avenues that are available to them, and they're going to sue. And the best way an employer can prevent that from happening is to cultivate the emotional intelligence in their leaders, so that they're good leaders, not managers, but leaders. And that seems to be a fail-proof way of making sure that litigation is capped. Oh, you're on mute, Vicki.
That's better. So that's really a great observation. And I know a lot of companies, even before our COVID and pandemic, were downsizing, right sizing, and the way that they got less people, let's put it that way, was not always done in a way that made the person that was let go feel that it was nothing to do with them. That it was like, questioning, was my performance poor? Was I not valued? And, a lot of times it's just about the numbers, but that was not ever really expressed. And so now you go into looking for a new job feeling that you're not quite as skilled or as good as you thought you were.
That's right. A bad boss can impact the career trajectory of a person infinitely. If you get one bad boss at the beginning of your career and your self-talk becomes what that bad boss was saying to you, it can take you off the rails for the rest of your career. So it's really important for organizations to cultivate the emotional intelligence of their leadership, not only to cut down on the litigation, but also to make sure that you're maximizing the potential of the folks being led, because they're going to be in a leadership position eventually. And so it's really ensuring that you've got good folks coming up to lead your company later too.
Yeah, that's so true. In my 40 years, I've seen the results of that. So let's kind of step back a moment. I don't know that this is a question that people have out there, because it's been in the news and the lingo for so long, but just explain briefly what emotional intelligence is, and maybe to describe what two are the most important components of emotional intelligence to help the audience better understand.
Happily. So the concept has been around since the 1960s, but it was popularized by an industrial psychologist in the 1990s by the name of Daniel Goleman. And he wrote a book of the same title, Emotional Intelligence. And he postured in his book that more important to someone's career trajectory, to their success, more important than the substantive hard skills that a person possesses, emotional intelligence will impact the success of a person in their career greater than those hard skills. And he argued that there are 5 components of emotional intelligence, what we used to call soft skills, which he argues are more important. And that's self-awareness,
Right.
you know, what makes me tick, what triggers me, how do I feel about this particular issue, how am I going to react to this particular situation. The next is empathy, understanding how another person is going to react or perceive information or feel, and not just feeling sorry for them, having sympathy for them, but rather putting yourself in their shoes so that you can lead them in the way that they need to be led, not the way that you need to be led, the way they need to be led. The next one is self-regulation, your capacity to be able to control your own impulses, your own behaviors in such a way that it keeps you calm and alert and empathic to the situation at hand. So in my courses, I teach breath work exercises that are very simple, that are time tested and are effective to help a leader calm their nerves before going into a meeting, before issuing discipline, after they've been brought some horrible information, you know, how to calm themselves down. The 4th component is motivation. A person needs a consistent motivator to keep them engaged in the work. So you need to know what that is for yourself, and you need to know what that is for the folks that you lead. What motivates them? Some people just want money, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people need an attagirl. Some people need to know that what they've done is pleasing to the boss or to the bottom line. Some people need to understand how their particular piece in what they do at work fits into the larger organization. So you need to know what that is for every individual you're leading. And then the 5th component is social deftness, or your social skills, being able to read the room, being able to detect in someone's body language or their face how they're feeling about information they're receiving. And that goes hand in glove with empathy, right? Oh, I just delivered this piece of information to this person. I see that they're upset, you know, grabbing the box of tissue, asking if they need a moment, or when you're in a room giving a speech, picking up on the body language of the folks in the audience and maybe shifting to deliver the message in another way if what you're saying isn't being well received.
Right.
And he argued that the two most important components rather are self-awareness and empathy. They're really two sides of the same coin. Self-awareness of what makes you tick, and empathy about what the person you lead needs to make them tick.
So very true. And you know, I think that's that course, that one piece should be every person who is applying to go into supervision or management should have that course. It's, you know, for me, when I was just going into management, we had opportunities of training quite often, but it wasn't until you got into, as a supervisor, you had like how to manage, but it wasn't until you were a manager that they taught you how to lead. And I thought, but why wouldn't you teach anyone how to lead? Because you don't know. There are people that are in the workforce on the line that actually would make great leaders, but don't see themselves that way.
Right. That's right. That's why I think it's so important for this sort of training to come from the top down in an organization.
Yeah.
Before human resources can roll out a campaign like this, you have to have buy-in from the top down. Otherwise, it's not going to be impactful. It's
Yeah.
not going to be taken seriously. It's not going to be impactful. So it really has to start from the top, with the top person cultivating their own emotional intelligence, especially self-awareness and empathy. And then in the course of time, it's trickling down to upper management, middle management, and then your line employees. But without buy-in from the very top of the organization, it's not going to be an effective campaign.
That's so true. One of the big projects that I had rolled out was to change our talent um, application. And in it, we did a lot of training, retraining really, to middle management and upper management. And the upper management and even the top didn't attend oftentimes. And I
Right.
thought, what message is this sending to you?
That's right.
Here we are, and we are telling all of these people that were so receptive to how we were saying that they should be led, and yet the the people that they knew that were their leaders were not there.
That's right. And they can see it and
Mhm.
they don't take it seriously. Or worse, they don't think the company takes it
Yeah,
seriously.
yeah.
And so that's going to make matters worse, right?
Mhm.
That's going to lend into the narrative. I am, as an employee, am not valued, seen, and heard. And so when something happens to me, I'm going to assume, because I'm left with no other choice, that it's discrimination, harassment, or
Yeah,
retaliation. And so
yeah.
it's really in the organization's best interest, not only so that their leadership leads better, but also the narrative that the face that you're presenting to your organization, to your line employees, is one of, that they are valued, seen, and heard, that they have psychological safety, and
Mhm.
that they can bring their true, authentic self to work.
And often, whenever we did employee surveys, the question of, do you trust your manager, and that feeling of, is there integrity there? Even though the core values of the company were trust, integrity, although self-respect or respect, and yet there was always this underlying feeling, well, no, no, and the trust numbers were always low, and it was,
Yeah.
oh, so anything that manager or director did after that survey to try to improve that number was always felt like it wasn't sincere.
Right. It's responsive
Mm-hmm.
to the information instead of naturally and organically processed, because they recognized on their own that it was valuable. I run into that a lot as well.
Yeah. So in that regard, how does a leader measure their emotional intelligence?
There are a treasure trove of websites that a person can go on to test their uh, current level of emotional intelligence. And that should be evaluated before you take any sort of course, and then again afterward, and then maybe every 6 months, to see where you have gaps in knowledge and need to bone up.
Mm-hmm.
But there are an infinite number of
Yes, they are.
ways to test online, and it's inexpensive because it's free, and you can just Trevelent, I believe, offers one that's excellent. And you're going to want a narrative explanation back to yourself. So pick one, and you can take a variety of them. They're like 15 minutes of your life.
Yeah.
And, navigate through the questions. Don't try to trick it. Just take it naturally and see where you fall and see where you have gaps in knowledge and gaps in emotional intelligence. And then you know where to focus.
Yeah. And then the thing is to do focus.
Yes,
Just don't do that evaluation or assessment and then not do anything.
that's right.
So that self-awareness is, comes into
Yes.
play here. So whenever you do have a high emotional intelligence among the leaders of the organization, what does that look like from a workplace scenario?
So the human resources team can use a variety of metrics to measure. You mentioned one, company surveys of, where employees feel they're being best utilized, how they feel, whether they feel valued, seen, and heard, have psychological safety. So the organization should be evaluating how employees feel, and that should be done anonymously. It shouldn't be done, verbally in front of someone or in written form that is attaching identity to it. It should be done anonymously. And the organization should evaluate its own emotional intelligence as an organization, and then launch some sort of a campaign to address it if that's a value to the organization. But so a variety of metrics can be used, training can be used, reevaluating policies and procedures that you may need to bone up on. Perhaps one of the places that folks aren't feeling valued, seen, and heard, maybe your illness policies, your vacation policies, your pregnancy leave policies. Like, where are your employees communicating to you that there needs to be a reevaluation, and then responding to that call to action by your own employees. You can't take the surveys and then do nothing with it. The employees really need to see a tangible impact by what they're telling you in the survey or in other evaluations. Otherwise, they're not going to take the next one seriously.
That's an interesting thing. So I was the administrator for my group for many years of the surveys. And one of the things that we saw is year after year, the survey results would come in and there were certain things that were addressed, but nobody knew that the things that were being done were to address that issue, that thing. So then whenever the people took the survey again, they still didn't think it was being addressed. So one of the action items were, let's make sure everybody knows that we're doing this initiative, this training to try to address this issue, this concern you had. And we want further feedback. Is this enough? Do we want to should we do more? And so that started to make an impact.
Right. Communicating with your employees, pardon me, is the most important aspect of cultivating the emotional intelligence of the organization. If your employees if they're not informed that that's what you're doing, then it's for naught. So 2 ways that an employer can communicate with its employees that it's working on this issue are with policies and procedures, an employee handbook that is your first entree of communication about climate and culture with your employees. It's not only about expectations of performance, it's also about climate and culture. And then also training, employee training. Training doesn't have to just be professional development where you're learning hard skills, or, a new software, or, it also can be a new way of thinking, a new way of interfacing, a new way of uh, cultivating harmony in the workplace. And so if you're having a training about let's treat each other better, that's going to really get the attention of your employees, especially if all you have been offering is professional development before that. And so communicating with your employees is a key component of making this campaign work if you're going to roll out a campaign like this.
One of the areas, when we talk about the surveys too, there are some things in the survey results that the individuals in the groups really couldn't impact the change, that the change had to come from the top. It had to be a change of process or policy. And so that meant the top leaders had to address it. And those were often the ones that weren't addressed year after year because it was a bigger project, if you will. But it is important, to listen to the employees and what they're saying and seeing if there is a change that needs to be in the culture.
I totally agree. Your employees are not just your hands doing the work of your organization, but they're also your communicators of what the organization really does look like on the line. And if you're not listening to them, you can do all you want up here, in upper management or in human resources. You can do all you want to launch various campaigns, but if you're not listening, communication goes two ways. It's interactive, or should be. If you're not listening to what's being communicated back to you, hey, this campaign did not work, it did not land, you've got to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. If you're not doing that, then your campaign is not going to be effective, unfortunately.
And if you even take it to a more wider or more holistic, is that everything that you do impacts the perception of the employees, who then will talk to those around you. What a survey question often is, would you recommend this is a good place to work? And, now the retention issue comes up, or the not attracting talent that you need becomes issues greater than you were dealing with prior to those surveys.
That's right. One of the best ways to recruit is through your current staff. And if your current staff would not recommend working there, you're not going to get very many applications for, based on referrals from your own employees.
And if you think of, this employment litigation too, if you are having let's not say an abundance, but more than you would like of litigation, employment litigation. So what are top 5 things that employers can do to really leverage emotional intelligence and then thereby reduce the risk of this employment litigation?
So I've talked about them a little bit, but besides, cultivating the emotional intelligence in the leadership. So let's think of if we're building a monument, and which every organizational leader wants their organization to be a monument. The foundation of that monument is the emotional intelligence of the leadership. And then there are 5 pillars which go on that foundation and raise up the organization. And these are time tested. 25 years of litigating. These are the things I see that are really effective to change the beat of an organization into a positive note. So the first thing I've already touched on is the employee handbooks and policies and procedures. As I said, policies and procedures and handbooks are not just a device to communicate performance expectations to your employees. They're also a mechanism to communicate climate and culture to your employees. In fact, an employee handbook is usually the first piece of communication with a new employee about what this organization stands for. And if you're putting in buzzwords about climate and culture, about emotional intelligence, about psychological safety, that the employee is valued, seen, and heard. You're putting buzzwords, dog whistles in there, which make an employee already feel like, wow, I made a great choice of coming to this organization. If you're doing that in your employee handbook, you're already addressing things about which an employee might want to sue later, climate and culture. And then if you're leveraging what you're communicating in the employee handbook into training, professional development about those very topics, making sure you're having trainings about psychological safety, making sure you're having trainings about employee communication and how much that's valued and how to do that and where to go to do that. That's really valued. So trainings shouldn't just be hard skills. They should also be these softer skills so that employees feel like they made a great choice in coming to work here. I also recommend conducting investigations when there's an allegation that a leader is not meeting the standards of valuing employees. Investigations are required when there is, an incident of harassment in the workplace or workplace violence. They're required then. But I'm talking about launching an investigation when it's not required legally, when you're just wanting to pop the hood and look inside and see, what is it like to work in this division under this particular leader? And so you're bringing somebody in, a third party, you're bringing them in to sort of pop the hood, take a look, and communicate back to you, what's really going on and why do employees feel like they have no psychological safety in this particular division under this particular leader. I also recommend doing when there are personality conflicts between employees to sort of emphasize the importance of psychological safety, having some sort of mechanism in place that's a conflict resolution so that there's a third neutral third party communicating with both colleagues to get to a place where as they say in mediation, both parties are equally unhappy and equally happy, that there's been a compromise. I'll just take a small example. It really makes me nauseous when you bring fish to work and heat it up in the microwave. Okay, I won't bring fish to work anymore, and you've come together and come to a resolution. If you need conflict resolution, it's going to be something much bigger than that. But bringing in someone who is a neutral, who doesn't know the characteristics or personality traits of either person. And then the fifth component is really the metrics that an employer will use to evaluate the psychological safety of employees, whether employees feel valued, seen, and heard. So using a baseline metric to determine where employees are, then launching a campaign where you're teaching emotional intelligence or some other mechanism to ensure that employees feel valued, seen, and heard. And then you're taking another evaluation of how well the campaign worked. And then you're taking evaluations in the future. So you're measuring where you were, where you are, and where you want to go. And there are a variety of metrics human resources can employ to evaluate various, places where employees feel. And if you're using those 5 components on a foundation of emotional intelligence, you should be pretty you should have reduced your risk for employment litigation very much.
Awesome. Such good tips. So those of you that are just listening, don't forget, you can watch this to get all those things down, but they will be in the show notes for sure. Awesome. All right. Well, it is time now for me to share the contact information for Jacquiline. If you say, oh my gosh, everything she said here, I need, and I want to know more and see if I can help my organization, or I can guide my organization to get in touch with Jacquiline. So I'm going to share the screen right now. If you're just listening, you can go to my YouTube channel to see all this information, Vicki Noethling. So please do subscribe, as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com in the show notes. So for those just listening, the website is wagnerhr.com. That's WAGNERHR.com, Wagner.com. On LinkedIn, you can search her name, Jacquiline Wagner, and then some numbers. But if you just search for JACQUILINE-Wagner, you will find her. And eSpeakers is, again, Jacquiline Wagner, hyphenated. I'm going to turn it over to Jacquiline to be able to tell you about what you can find when you go to her website, some resources that she has there, as well as what you might find if you go to LinkedIn or eSpeakers. So Jacquiline, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Vicki. I appreciate the shout out. Yeah, so if you go to my website, you can reach me there. And we offer those 5 pillars, as well as emotional intelligent leadership training. You'll find a list of trainings that we offer besides just professional development, substantive courses that we offer, employee handbooks. We offer conflict resolution. We offer the professional development and investigations, and leadership courses. So visit us at wagnerhr.com.
Fantastic. All right. So Jacquiline, it's just been so informative. Everything that you said, I've lived through and can agree that she does know her stuff, and you guys definitely need to go out to her website to connect with her. As always, thank you for being a fantastic guest.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling, signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.